Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Certification course. Everyone in the auditorium can be seated. Welcome all of you that are watching online. I hope everybody has a respect unit. And of course, you can be turning over to page 68. We're going to finish the What I Have Learned section on page 68. We kind of got caught in the middle of that last class. And of course, we were talking about in the last class how we need to respect others by being considerate of their feelings and needs. We had left off on showing respect. We want to show respect to authority figures by listening to and following their instruction as long as they don't conflict with moral values. And of course, that's the bullet point we're on right now. And we finished off by talking about how people, when they go through life, and of course people change. We talked about how voices change as people grow from young adults or from children into young adults, and then of course advance into age. And then people go through health problems and they go through certain things, and that also changes their bodies. And we'd close the class by talking about how people can be disrespectful by making fun of them, by kind of laughing and joking because of these things that are pretty much beyond people's control. But we want to be working on this bullet point right here. And it's the the fifth bullet point found on page 68 in your respect unit. And we're going to close this out tonight so we can get started on introducing ourselves to chapter 4. It's really important we get to that point by the end of the class tonight. And it says, once again, show respect to authority figures by listening to and following their instructions as long as they don't conflict with moral values. So the question becomes, is there a time that you cannot listen to an authority figure? Well, if someone tells you to do something that would bring harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment, now that doesn't mean that, telling me to do something I don't want to do is causing harm to me, so therefore I don't think I need to do it. Let's don't get where we define these things to be combative, and of course where we take the peaceful solution out of it and we start becoming someone who's always seeking confrontation. We're talking about it bringing harm. It damages, it hurts, it could cause bodily harm, death, sickness, disease, any of those things. And looking over to page 62, remember we covered the section entitled Who's in Charge? And it says that respecting others also involves respecting authority. An authority figure, once again, is defined as anyone who is placed in a position of being in charge of your safety and well-being. So notice that's what an authority figure actually is supposed to do, is guard and protect you, to keep you from harm. So, of course, someone who's teaching you to do things that are of moral value and are doing their job as an authority would never tell you to do something that would bring harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment. Notice it says, of course, your parents and teachers are authority figures, but have you ever considered that an older brother or sister who is asked to take care of you is also your authority? Now, that can be a challenge for younger children. I was a middle child, and of course, everybody wants to be in charge, right? Everybody wants to be in charge, but nobody wants the responsibility of what takes place when it goes wrong. No one wants to have to answer for that. But it says, in addition to this, authority figures also include coaches, your school bus driver, and the police. Authority figures will change according to the situation. The important thing to remember is that an authority figure is there to guide, direct, and protect you. And notice, they deserve respect. And we've covered that since the very beginning of the Peaceful Solution. Of course, we've been getting into it in this book. But when we started with character, we started off by talking about how everyone deserves respect. This old additive that you have to earn my respect. Until you earn my respect, then I'm not going to give you any respect. And of course, we've talked about how foolish that is in many cases. And when you go back into looking at that, that's why there's failures in society. Because remember the basic fundamentals of positive communication, the foundation is, of course, respect. But the foundation of negative communication is disrespect. So if you're never coming to that, the mindset that everyone deserves respect, of course, we'll never be able to have genuine relationships where you build that are beneficial and that help society become a better place. Continuing on, it says, bear in mind always, that an authority figure should never ask you, once again, underline that, emphasize that, stress that to your students, and of course, this is something we should stress to ourselves, that an authority figure should never ask you to participate in anything that is morally incorrect. And remember what morals are. They're on page 8 of the character unit, and it had that dividing line, but that is the dividing line between what is right and wrong, or what is positive and negative. No one should ever ask you to do something that is morally wrong, something that brings harm, something that damages, something that would affect you in a negative way. If that should occur, you must always choose to say no or speak to someone you trust about the situation. And continuing on, notice, you can show respect for an authority figure by being courteous and polite. In addition, you should follow instructions and rules set by those who are in authority. Rules are given to keep things running smoothly and to keep people safe. Those in charge are responsible for ensuring the rules and instructions are followed. And that's truly what it means to be someone that is in charge or in authority, is that the rules that they were taught, that they're teaching them to someone else, and they're helping people to live their life according to those rules. And that's important as we get into the next chapter, because we're going to get back into a society and what it means to be in a society. And remember, we covered that in chapter 5 of the character unit, and we talked about a society that is actually moving in the right direction, or that is beneficial, is a society that is governed by a common body of rules, and everyone lives according to those common body of rules. And those rules are created to keep people safe. They're not created to get your money. They're not created to take advantage. These rules are created to keep people safe. You can think about them in a very basic essence as, stop signs on the road, stop lights at intersections, a yield sign, so to speak. Traffic laws are things we can very easily identify that they're there to keep us safe. And of course, when we don't adhere to those, when we kind of just blow right through them and we think that we don't need them, well, if you've ever seen someone run a stop sign in the middle of an intersection where people are going 60 mile an hour down the road, here in Texas, we have intersections where the speed limit's 75 mile an hour. And if you run the stop sign and someone hits you, you're going to get hit by someone going at least 75 mile an hour. And that can be very devastating. And you start realizing how important that red sign that says STOP is. The only problem is once you run it and you get hit and the damage comes, it's too late to consider your options at that point. You've already made your choice. And of course, the damage is already on the way. But it's the same thing with life. When we talk about the STOP acronym, that's what we're supposed to, the whole point of stopping is so we can consider what the outcome of our choices are going to be. And of course, this respect for authority or being someone in authority all has to do with the compliance of rules. And that's where the safety comes from. They keep us safe. These rules do. Continuing on here, it says, rules are given to keep things running smoothly and to keep people safe. Those in charge are responsible for ensuring that rules and instructions are followed. The way you choose to respond to those rules and instructions determines if you're being respectful. Does showing respect or disrespect to those in authority really matter? Well, we had scenarios there to actually show, and this is something you should discuss with your classroom also. Does it really matter if you show respect for the rules? Well, here lately in this last week in Tennessee, in Nashville, I'm sure there's a lot of people that have respect for no guns in school because we have yet another school shooting. And of course, there's always something devastating. Here in the United States, it is the land of opportunity and, of course, a very developed nation, but it's also a land of a lot of heartbreak. Every day you can go on the news and you can see something that is just extremely destructive, and it has to do with a breakdown of that authority or the teacher or the parent that was supposed to lead, guide, teach, and instruct to show the benefit of the rules, because anytime a crime is committed, anytime a life is taken in that nature, of course, the rules are broken. The respect is taken away. The care for all life, the care, concern, and consideration is completely removed. And that's where we have a breakdown in society. So the respecting of authority, you can think of it as your mom, your dad, your supervisor, your school teacher. But what if there's someone waiting at the door to greet you at a facility you enter? Well, who's the authority? It's the person at the door, and they're there to give you the rules. If you've ever been into certain stores, like you can go into Lowe's, so to speak, and I'll just use this as an example, or Home Depot, either one. And I seen one time a young man just riding his skateboard all through the store. And I thought, I've never seen that before. I'm sure he's going to hit somebody. And they finally told him, you got to get your skateboard and get out of here, because if you hit somebody, you're going to hurt them. And of course, that was a rule. But some of these rules make common sense. Whenever you're walking around where you have people that are using canes and walkers, and you have older people, or you have people that are carrying things, and you have people that are, tools on their sides to begin with, something should kind of click that you shouldn't be riding your skateboard as fast as you can in the middle of all that. It's like going out to the middle of the interstate and trying to do that. Well, someone in authority had the right to say, you can't do that here. Did the person own the store? No. Did they represent the store? Yes, but it didn't take someone that represented the store to know that what you're doing is dangerous and you shouldn't be doing it. But you start, that's the first time I've ever seen that in my life. And you would think, I wonder where this person thought that doing this was okay, where they were not putting someone in danger with what they're doing. There's a whole parking lot outside you could do that in, and they probably wouldn't have said anything. But to come inside where the people are at and business is being conducted, well, that's disrespect, not only for authority, but also for society in general. And of course, the scenarios were there for us to go through, and that helped us bring together about the respect for authority. Now, going back over to page 68, because we want to get through the last two bullet points so we can get started on chapter 4. The next bullet point is people who are different, for whatever reason, should also be shown respect. And of course, if you turn back over to page 60, so people who are different, for whatever reason, no matter what it is, we tend to think that that's only color of skin. That if you've ever walked through, and I think the most diverse place I've ever been in, where you actually can see an enormous amount of difference in people, is an international airport. Because you will see people making connecting flights, people that are only there, people that are only in the country to catch their next flight. And you will see all walks of life. Here in Texas, we have Houston International. We also have Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. And, of course, whenever you're in those facilities, you see people from many different countries, many different languages you hear spoken. And like I said, some of them are not even staying in the United States. They're just connecting to another flight that's taking them somewhere else. But of course, when you see someone that's from a different country or you hear a different language, that's one form of diversity. But what about when you see someone that just doesn't look normal to you? Possibly they have a handicap. Possibly there's something that is deformed. Possibly something's not shaped the way you think it should be. And these are things that take place in society that we can really, just by staring at someone, can really make someone feel extremely uncomfortable and make them feel devalued. Well, here on page 60, we talked about respecting diversity, and it says, along with communicating our needs appropriately, we must also respect others by appreciating and accepting their differences. People come in all different shapes, sizes, and nationalities and cultures. And when you think about a child, as a child grows, becomes an adult, think about someone who has a deformity. What can a child possibly do about its deformity? If it's born that way, what could it possibly do to have changed that? Absolutely nothing. And if you have someone, I seen a commercial here not long ago. It was a child that had no arms, just here and here. And I thought about what a challenge it must be to live life like that. And I watched a video. I've seen videos of a gentleman that from right around the waist down is completely gone. And I've watched, a lot of these people can be very inspiring one, they don't want pity for sure. Two, they show you that, life's whatever you make of it. You can succeed no matter what it is. You just can't do everything. As the gentleman that was missing below the waist, he said, and he's very athletic. You can tell he lifts a lot of weights. But he said, I'll never kick a football, but I can do everything else. And I think he was breaking the world record for fastest speed on hands or something like that. That's what he was doing. But it was interesting to watch how he took what he was missing and he adapted his life to try to fit in to make challenges for himself. But you think back, what could he have done differently to change his situation? The answer is nothing. Now, are there things that his parents and grandparents and great-grandparents could have done differently? Well, we see a lot of times where people work with deadly chemicals, or they use drugs, or they get caught up into something that can lead to birth defects, not even by their own choice or their own doing. We've seen even here in the United States where people drinking water that have tainted water, and it causes deformities or learning abilities. It causes those dysfunctions in their children. So there's some things that can be guarded against and some things that can't be guarded against at all. But one thing you can't choose is where you're born. That's not really your choice. That's the choice of your parents, actually. So, and you think about how different life can be. If you've never had the privilege, I encourage people to, it's really, I consider it a tragedy to go through life and never talk to someone from another country. Get to know what life is like in other countries. You will find out life is very different than what you have here in the United States. And of course, you get into other countries and, you get into the Middle East with the United Arab Emirates and some of those other countries that are just absolutely beautiful. And of course, their life, I was hearing about someone the other day that said, they're here in Texas now, and they said it's going to be interesting staying on the ground. And I asked the person that was telling me, I said, well, what does that mean? They've always been in a skyscraper. They have no idea what it's like to live on the ground. I was like, wow, well, wait till they see what crawls on the ground in Texas. There's a lot of life out here. So it'll be interesting. But, that's very different for people. And, there's all kinds of different things, different challenges. I've talked to people in other countries that they could hardly care less about money. It means absolutely nothing to them. When you deal with villages that are in like Kenya and so forth, where they barter with food, they barter with animals, they do labor and trade. Money, a shilling, which is money in Kenya, means absolutely nothing to them. I can't eat it. It doesn't grow anything. If I put it in the ground, it's worthless to me. And they'll tell you that. And they're very successful people, and they're able to do a lot of things, but they're workers, and they're knowledgeable about how to do things. Very different than other cultures that think, well, I can't do anything unless I have money. I got to have money or I can't accomplish anything. They're very different. And of course, you don't see them driving cars. You don't see cars out in the villages. Well, for one, there's not gas stations really out in the villages, so the car wouldn't be very beneficial out there. But you see all of these differences, and you get into other parts of the world, and it's really a pleasure to communicate with people and to learn. You're always going to learn something. Diversity will bring you knowledge. It will help you do things in your life to do things better. Whether it be to learn how to cook a new dish, to enjoy a food, to use a spice differently, or to even use it at all. I found in Trinidad that I really enjoyed food that I've eaten in America, and I couldn't stand it. But I ate it in Trinidad, and it was curry, goat, and roti. And when I ate it there, I realized I really liked this stuff. I just never had it made authentic. But it was really great. But these are things that we learn as we get to know and we grow. And of course, you can make friends in today's society. You just need one of these things. And you have friends all around the world, just at your fingertips. And I know it's at my fingertips because I get messages all day and all night long. And it's right at their fingertips. And it's great to get those messages. But the only downside to knowing people and respecting diversity, the greatest challenge I found is respecting the time difference. When someone gets up in the morning and they want to ask a question, well, morning in, Africa is 3 o'clock or 1 o'clock a.m. here, or 11 a.m. here. and, or 11 p.m., I mean. And of course, when someone has a question and it can be an emergency to them, you try to do your best, but you want to stay awake when you're answering the questions also. But it's a wonderful thing, this diversity, when we learn to embrace it and realize that those differences we see actually can be a very interesting thing to get to know, to learn, and to develop. Well, continuing on here, though, it says people come in all different shapes and sizes, nationalities, and cultures. Some are born mentally or physically challenged. And once again, how can that child change that? What could they have done differently? The answer is nothing. It's not their fault. While others might be in a wheelchair because of sickness or an accident. Regardless of how different someone might appear to be, they still deserve respect. Respecting diversity means not teasing, putting others down, or ignoring people because of their nationality, physical appearances, or disabilities. There's some diseases I've seen recently in working with some friends in other countries that they were experiencing with their children, where it causes the head to swell enormously. And I went online and I was looking at some children that have experienced this. I mean, and it is mind-blowing how the head just gets huge because of pressure that's built up in it. And you think about, here's a parent, they're willing to have their child's head cut open, have a pump, which is called a shunt, put into the brain that's always going to be there. That child, as an adult, will always have something there, and they have to change it out every so often. And you think about, the bullying, the disrespect, the picking, and all of these things that could come upon a child, because this is very popular. But when this child was first born, they were doing everything they could just to keep it alive. And this is for millions of people, because this is and you can actually, the one thing that I've seen about these things is that it's also developed by people who are 60 years and above. The same illness. You can develop it later on in life. So it's something where you could pick on someone when you're young and actually have it when you're older. And if you don't deal with it, your brain just starts to rot away. It goes away. And it's a horrific thing, but if you ever see someone that has something that doesn't look what you consider to be normal, well, first, what is normal? You look, wow, that guy's got a big nose. Well, how do you define, is every nose based off of your nose? Is everybody's eyes based off of your eyes, or everybody's mouth or hair, or is it all based off of what we think is normal? And who defines normal? Who defines what is right or correct? Well, of course, being healthy would be the first thing, but if someone is unhealthy or they have a mental illness, if you see someone with Down syndrome, if you see someone that's with a challenge, you always have to remember. And if you don't understand, always get to know these things. When you see someone that has like Down syndrome and you realize that one missing chromosome that you can't even see, just one missing item made that much of a difference in someone's life, made it to where life became not just challenging for them, but also challenging for the family in which the child was born. But of course, people that have a true love see that through, and they take care of those children even into adulthood, and they hold on to that. But it's something so small that can be missing that makes such a huge difference in someone's life, in their body, in their mind. Well, that's the same way character education also is in society. You can have positivity, you can have these rules missing, or you can even have a society that's saying, those rules are done away with. You don't need to keep those rules anymore. Then what rules do you use to govern your society to keep it safe? Who will help you to defend those who need to be defended? And who needs to be defended? Everybody. That's what the rules do for all of us. But continuing to the second paragraph, notice it says, people tend to disrespect others because they do not know enough about them or do not understand them sufficiently. Just how different are we? Articles published in July 2001 show that people have more similarities than differences. And we also covered this in the acceptance unit. The article states that human beings are 99.9% alike in their genetic sequence and proves that there is only the article states that human beings are 99.9% alike in their genetic sequence and proves that there is only one race, and that's the human race. In other words, if you have 100 pennies, the difference in the human species would only amount to 1/10 of 1 penny. 1/10 of 1 penny. Now, that's 0.0 or 0.1% that gives different physical characteristics such as skin color and hair texture. Or you also look, something interesting. When you go to countries where people have dark skin, here in America, we have this unimaginable desire for tan skin and sunbathing, and that's a billion-dollar-a-year business for people to get their skin darker. That's what people who have light skin, they want to get it darker. And when you go to countries where people, even in South America, where people have naturally dark skin, they avoid the sun like the plague. And when you see the Americans out there who they lay out in the sun, they just look at them like they're crazy. It's like, who would do that? And of course, the Americans are like, well, that's why I came here. I want to lay out in the sun. That's what we all do back in the United States. And of course, then that probably puts in their mind, that's why I want to go to America. They just lay around all day, just lay out in the sun and enjoy themselves. And I've had conversations with people who actually think those things, and you have to tell them, no, you don't get to lay out in the sun all day, but the sun is very healthy. You should check it out and read about it. Of course, it's different depending on where you're at in the world. When you're close to the equator, it can equal a lot more sun time very quickly. But turning back over to page 68, and we think about people who are different for whatever reason and how respect should be shown. And then we're going to talk about now people that are very different, and we can identify them as different, and it's okay to be different, and we should be very respectful because of this. And the very last bullet point here, it says, respect the opposite sex by refraining from making comments about their physical development, appearance, or touching them. And looking over to page 64, and this is something that, in society itself is one of the greatest challenges, because the things we're talking about by not saying something about someone's body, making comments about someone's body, society has created this atmosphere to where the dressing exposes the body. And if a person, specifically a female, is not comfortable with feeling that she's not what is considered a more attractive kind of body, you just go get plastic surgery. And you spend lots of money. And you literally butcher your body up so you can be what everybody else thinks you should be. But you were really just fine to begin with. You were who you were supposed to be to begin with. And when you get into these things, there's so much pressure put on people to where they will carve, change, alternate their body in general just to fit in because of the comments that are made. And these comments should have never been made to begin with. However they were born and however they were formed and however the body took shape, also men the same way, that's what it should be. If you want to lose weight, if you want to do something else, work at that. But, there's no reason because you feel that this exposure of a certain part of the body should be done. Well, I want to do that too, but I can't do it the way I am. But if I go pay $6,000, I can do that too. That's pressure that is put on someone that should never be applied. But looking here on page 64, it says how to show respect to the opposite sex. Notice here it says the adolescence is the time of constant change, both physically and mentally. Not only are you changing, but you're also beginning to notice physical changes in the opposite sex. Suddenly, the boy or girl who you grew up with no longer looks the same. Although becoming interested in someone of the opposite sex is normal and healthy, rude comments and gestures about someone's body are not. It is in fact disrespectful and degrading. Now, this used to be something very simplistic to say. And I don't want to get too far into this because it's already been taught. But we live in a society now that tells you as you grow up and as you get older, it's time for you to reflect on what you truly are. That's what's taught in the society today. But I'm pretty sure throughout thousands of years of history, whenever someone was born, you could be identified what you were when you were born. You didn't have to wait till you were 15 or till you were 16. You didn't have an emotional attachment. You could be identified with what you were born with or without as to what you are. But our society is changing so much to now to where you can think you're whatever you want to be. And there's a confusion that comes from that. Now, we talked about respecting diversity and the differences in people, but we also have to make sure we don't confuse people with what has already been set as a standard and we know to be true. And we know that when those rules that govern that standard are not kept and protected, many diseases can be brought from that. But continuing on here, it says, each person's body is private and must be treated with respect. And this is owed to everyone. When young men and young women make derogatory comments about each other's physical development or appearance, they are not showing respect. The physical development of each person is part of the natural process of becoming an adult and should not be reduced to comments that make a person feel embarrassed or ashamed. You know, I've even seen situations where people will go out, they will dress very provocatively, which I mean they're exposed, and if someone makes a comment about them, they actually get offended. And it's one of those situations where you're right. No one should make a comment about you, but you really shouldn't be drawing attention. If you hadn't drew attention to it, no one would have made a comment. And people say, well, it's my right to do what I want to do. Well, if you're going to live by that rule, you're going to have to live by that rule that it's everybody's right to do what they want to do. And when you do something that's wrong and you endorse that you're right to do something that's wrong, you're also endorsing it's right for everyone else to do something that's wrong also. So you have to be very careful about these rules and how you want to redefine them and how you want to apply them. If your mindset is, I know it's wrong, but it's my choice and I'm going to do it. When someone does that to you, remember, it was their choice and they wanted to do it. You create a lot of chaos in society. We can, by looking at it that way. But once again, it says here, notice we are to avoid any and all comments about someone's physical development and appearance. The problem with these comments is they can lead to even a greater form of disrespect, which is touching. This violates one's rights to privacy. You should regard another person's body as private. Something that is private is off limits to anyone but the owner. And someone once asked, well, who's the owner? I own my body. Well, if you go and you take a child that's 10 years old, they're going to report you as stealing someone's child. And who is the owner? It's not the child, it's the parents or the guardian. And until a person is of 18 years of age, 17 or under, their parents are responsible for them. This is the laws of the United States. If you're going to go touch someone who is under that age, you can go to prison. You can be charged with a crime for doing something to a child. Why are they defined as a child? Why does 17 make them a child and 18 make them an adult? That was determined by some people in Washington, D.C. sitting on Capitol Hill. It doesn't really determine the comprehension, but those are rules that are put into place that we have to adhere to. And when you think about touching someone, first of all, you need to consider, do you even have permission? Well, I do from that person. Well, is that person 16? Have you talked to their parents? Because I don't know of any parents that you're going to talk to that's being moral, that if you ask someone, hey, can I do something immoral with your daughter? You're probably going to have to run the other way. I don't know of any parent that would go, oh, sure, yeah, it's okay. You know, I think most people would be running the other way. They would never. That's why most of the time people never want to meet someone else's parents. Why? Because that's the person that wants the rules kept. Well, I don't really want to keep the rules. I want to break them. So I don't really want to be around these people that are putting these rules in. Well, once again, always remember, everything belongs to somebody. And if it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to somebody else. And we should never invade someone's privacy, especially in a physical way. And if you look over to the next page, it talks about straight talk. You see here it says touching, teasing, and of course sexual harassment. And notice that says involving making crude remarks about a person's personal appearance or even touching them. Although you might think you are complimenting a person on what they look like, you might be making them feel uncomfortable and not even considering their feelings. Sexual harassment is demeaning and wrong. There are rules in your school against it and laws in society that prohibit it. And then, of course, you have sexual abuse, and that is taking full advantage of another person and notice forcing them to engage in activities. This also is called rape, and it is the worst form of disrespect, and it must be avoided. You know, and a lot of people can say that, no, it wasn't rape. We all agreed to do it. But you know what? If you agreed to do it, then there should be more of a compliance. There should be a better environment. There should be some rules that were applied in this agreement. Remember, an agreement means you agree to certain standards and rules. If you ever signed an agreement, there's a lot of rules and regulations in there. And if you say we agreed to it, then what rules did you agree to? A lot of times we just agreed to do something. Well, there's rules that govern that too, that keep society safe, that where you need to abstain from risk-taking behaviors. Did you adhere to those? Most people don't. And then when they get into the situation that they didn't want to be in, they look back and realize where it went wrong. But turning back over to page 68, of course, at the very bottom of the page, to close out this section of chapter 3, it says, rest assured the respect you show to others is well worth the effort. Why? Because it reciprocates. What you do, for every action, there's a reaction. And when you're respectful to others, doesn't mean someone's always going to be respectful to you. You know, you could blow your horn when someone's getting ready to do something that's going to cause them harm in traffic, and you blow the horn, and most people get upset when you blow a horn at them, at least here in the United States. In other countries, they blow a horn to let you know a taxi's coming so you can have a ride. The horns are always blowing. And that's just so you can stick your hand up. You hear a horn blow, stick your hand up, and the taxi pulls over right where you're at. But they do that constantly to let you know that they're open and ready to give somebody a ride. It took us a while to figure that out in Argentina. We kept hearing all these horns, and man, they see Americans, they think American dollars. Every taxi blew their horn. And we just couldn't figure it out. We finally figured it out. When you needed a taxi, here come like 5 at one time, because they wanted American dollars. Well, looking over to page 69, because this chapter actually has a lot of enrichment activities and also scenarios that is very important to go through with your students. So you can look, you have the enrichment activities, and remember, this is meant to reinforce what we've learned. And then you have a scenario, it's called the long way home. And this is something that's important to play for your class, and it's about a home for girls where, you're talking about rehabilitation of behavior, helping people make choices, helping people do things in a better way. And, I don't want to ruin the ending for you, but it's a situation where, people actually learned through seeing someone go through a situation, picking on someone, and then not having the opportunity to make things right. And I'll leave it at that so you can, if you have our book on PDF, the MP3 is embedded into the file and you can play it. But you can also, if you don't have the CD that goes with your book, just email the Peaceful Solution and we will send you the MP4s that go to these things, because we had some people that spent a lot of time years ago when this was created, and they put these things together and they did it very well. There's a lot of emphasis. They were really some really decent actors that went into putting this stuff together, and it really helps bring it to life for you. And then, of course, there's a quiz after that. It's called It's Quiz Time, and you can go through that quiz, and then you get into the power of respect, which is also something that helps you to communicate this application of what's been taught. And, of course, it's power of respect on page 80. We're going to read through this really quickly because this is actually some really decent things that come forth. And it says, an elementary teacher named Miss Thompson stood in front of her 5th grade class on the first day of school and told her students a lie. Like most teachers, she looked at her students and said she loved them all the same, but that was impossible. But there in the front row, slumped in his seat, was a little boy named Teddy Studdard. Miss Thompson had watched Teddy the year before and noticed that he didn't play well with other children, that his clothes were messy, and that he constantly needed a bath. Teddy could be really unpleasant. It got to the point where Mrs. Thompson would actually take delight in marking his papers with a broad red pen, making bold X's, and then putting a big F on top of his papers. So she actually started to enjoy this. At the school where Miss Thompson taught, she was required to review each student's past records, and she put Teddy's off until last. However, when she reviewed his file, she was in for a surprise. Teddy's first grade teacher wrote, "Teddy is a bright child and with a ready laugh. He does his work neatly and has great manners. He is a joy to be around." His second grade teacher wrote, "Teddy is an excellent student, well liked by his classmates, but he's in trouble because his mother has a terminal illness and life at home must be a struggle." His third grade teacher wrote, "His mother's death has been hard on him. He tries to do his best, but his father doesn't show much interest, and his home life will soon affect him if some steps aren't taken." Teddy's fourth grade teacher wrote, "Teddy is withdrawn and doesn't show much interest in school. He doesn't have many friends and sometimes sleeps in class." By now, Miss Thompson realized the problem, and she was ashamed of herself. Now, this was an authority figure. And think about this, an authority figure who prejudged someone, didn't get all the facts, had it set in their mind, this person's a failure, without even considering all of these things that this young man had gone through. She felt even worse when her students brought her presents wrapped in beautiful ribbons and bright papers, except for Teddy. His present was clumsily wrapped in the heavy brown paper that he got from a grocery bag. Miss Thompson took pains to open it in the middle of the other presents. Some of the children started to laugh when she found a rhinestone bracelet with some of the stones missing and a bottle that was 1/4 full of perfume. She was stifled the children's laughter when she exclaimed how pretty the bracelet was, putting it on and dabbing some of the perfume on her wrist. Teddy stuttered, stayed after school that day just long enough to say, "Miss Thompson, today you smelled just like my mom used to." After the children left, she cried for at least an hour on that day. She quit teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. Instead, she began to teach children. Miss Thompson paid particular attention to Teddy as she worked with him. His mind seemed to come alive. The more she encouraged him, the faster he responded. By the end of the year, Teddy had become one of the smartest children in the class. Despite that, she said she would love all of the children the same. Teddy became one of her teacher's pets. A year later, she found a note under her door from Teddy telling her that she was still the best teacher he had ever had in his whole life. 6 years went by before she got another note from Teddy. He then wrote that he had finished high school, third in his class, and she was still the best teacher he had ever had in his whole life. 4 years after that, she got another letter saying that while things had to be tough at times, he stayed in school and had stuck with it and would soon graduate from college with highest honors. He assured Miss Thompson she was still the best teacher he had ever had in his whole life. 4 more years passed, yet another letter came, this time to explain that after he got his bachelor degree, he decided to go a little further. Then he explained that she was still the best teacher he had ever had, but his name was now a little longer. The letter was signed Theodore F. Studdard, M.D. The story doesn't end here. You see, there was yet another letter that sprung. Teddy said he met this lady and was going to be married. He explained that his father had died a couple years ago and that he was wondering if Miss Thompson might agree to sit in the place at the wedding that was usually reserved for the mother of the groom. Of course, Miss Thompson did, and guess what? She wore that bracelet, the one with several rhinestones missing, and she made sure she was wearing the perfume that Teddy remembered his mother wearing. When they saw each other, Dr. Studdard whispered to Miss Thompson, "Thank you, Miss Thompson, for believing in me. Thank you so much for making me feel important and showing me that I can make a difference." Miss Thompson, with tears in her eyes, whispered back, "Teddy, you have it all wrong. You were the one who taught me that I could make a difference. I didn't know how to teach until I met you." And you get to the moral of the story, and you would think that, he gave her a gift and that changed everything. But really it didn't. It was the facts behind the situation. It was getting to know how the problem became and how it went wrong and what was leading things in the wrong direction. And for someone to actually acknowledge that and then learn how to work with someone. You know, you can take someone and you can give someone a gift, and that's never going to fix a situation without a lot of hard work to make a situation right, without a lot of hard work to help someone. And whenever we meet individuals, whenever you meet someone, you know, you never get to see all of the things they've been through in their life that make them who they are. And sometimes when you get to be friends with someone and someone starts talking about their problems, and you start hearing, and you're someone who's trying to helps inspire somebody, helps somebody feel better about themselves, helps somebody realize there's hope, and no matter what situation you're in, of course, when you're listening, a lot of times we listen to other people's problems like they lived our life. And it's not necessarily always true. When you start listening to problems, as you grow older, you start learning that there's an enormous amount people go through. I've talked to people that are my age that when I was 17, moving on to 18, I was leaving high school. At 18, I got married. People that I know today that were my age, when they were 18, they were already on their third year of prison, and they were there for 30-something years. Now they're back out into society. My life and their life, even though we're the same age and we grew up on the East Coast, is very different. My experiences are very different than their experiences. There's many things they could tell me that could help me understand things, and there's things I could tell them to help them understand things. But for us to think that our problems would be of the same value or equal to each other, well, they're very different. What might be considered a problem for this person, to me, it's nothing. Don't worry about it. But to them, they don't have all this experience. They've never been able to interact even with society to know, well, it's not that big of a deal. And then there's some things that if I was to go into a prison facility, they could probably tell me, don't ever do that. You don't want to do that. And I would think, what's the big deal? They'll kill you for it. Don't do that. I've learned going into certain countries, there's certain things you don't do. You don't even consider doing it. You make sure you avoid it. Whatever you do, don't even give the outlook that you're considering doing something, because it won't go very well. And these are things that you have to comply with. And of course, we can all offer each other something. And that's what brings us into, if you'll turn over to LP4A. LP4A, the very next chapter here, we're going to start off and we'll get through the note to the teacher. And of course, this is chapter 4 with respect and society. And remember in chapter 2, we talked about self-respect. That's respecting ourselves. In chapter 3, we talked about respecting others. And of course, now we're going to talk about how when we put these things together, it brings forth respect and society. Now remember what society is. And society can be defined many different ways. You think society or community. A lot of people would say community. But society, you have right here, we have a group of people that are part of the Peaceful Solution headquarters. And for people that are watching online, they might not know this, but there's a lot of people that move to this area to partake of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program so they can become certified. They'll actually move here to do it. And of course, you're being able to watch these things online. There's a lot of people that are traveling here for a huge Peaceful Solution event we're going to be having in just a little over a week from other countries. The great thing with COVID kind of, I wouldn't say going away. It hasn't went away, but it's become more, I guess, society has adapted to it. It's not as strong in the minds of people as it once was. So borders have opened back up to where people can travel. And, we're going to have a lot of people come in from many other countries that are coming for these things to learn about this Peaceful Solution. And this is something that goes all the way back, once again, to a young child hearing something their father said. And when you think about how powerful that is, to be able not just to get this put into a curriculum form, but a curriculum form that has been translated into at least 4 different languages now, and it's global. All because a man in Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl made a comment. and that's when life was supposed to be the worst of the worst, when everybody was fleeing and going their own way and living off next to nothing. It just goes to show how things can be said and they can make a huge difference in someone's life. And we might think it's nothing, but it makes a huge difference. Well, here on LP4A, this is the note to the teacher, and this is once again why it's extremely important for you to have a teacher's manual, because these won't be in the student's workbook. Anything that has a gray tab on it's only in the teacher's manual. So Chapter 4, Respect in Society, the note to the teacher. It says, starting out, because we live in a society characterized by diversity and culture, respect must be practiced consistently if we are to eradicate violence, crime, and racism. And we just covered that on page 60, and you might want to make a note there. And of course, we went through it in the acceptance unit also. There's actually 4 or 5 pages in the acceptance unit that help us to understand this diversity, even in dressing, the way people dress. You know that here not long ago in France, they were making it illegal, it seems like it's been 3 or 4 years ago, where they were wearing what they call a hijab, where women will cover their face. There's certain parts of the world, and it could be due to religious practice, where women cover their hair completely. They don't show their hair at all. Is there anything wrong with that? Absolutely not. If that's what they choose to do, they're not hurting anybody by not showing their hair. Well, you see, when you think of, people think of Saudi Arabia or somewhere over in the Middle East where women want to cover their face. Then I said that right. Women want to cover their face. I didn't say they're made to cover their face. I said they want to cover their face. I've met some of these people through business that I do that's international where they really want to do it. We've been to embassies and met with people that no one's making anyone do something. That's what they want to do. That's what they choose to do. There's other cultures to where they will put things right here, so you don't have to look at their hand to see if they're married. When you look at their face, you know they're married. That's how they identify. I'm off limits. Don't come to me about relationships. Don't try to smooth it over with me. You can see from right here, I'm married. And they'll put a little dot on their forehead to identify that. These are things that some people, might think, that's different. Well, why is it different? Is there anything wrong with it? Identifying that someone is married so they can be faithful to their husband? No, there's nothing wrong with that at all. That's why most people, wedding rings have become that way. But with anything that becomes, I don't think wedding rings were $4,000 or $5,000, back when people started making vows of marriage. So I don't think you didn't run down to the local jeweler and buy something. I think there was more to it than that. That's a history lesson that everyone can get into one day, but that's different than what we're talking about today. Continuing on here, it says, one of the most disturbing consequences of living in a society that condones so many forms of disrespect is that people become desensitized. And of course, once we get into the Building More Excellence unit, we're going to get a lot deeper into that word desensitized. But once again, it means having been made less sensitive. That's how Merriam-Webster they define it. And it's also defined as a psychological process. This means it's something that's put before you to change your way of thinking about something. Violence on TV. Whenever you see it and you see more and you see more and you see more, and it becomes where it's like, I can't believe that. And then you see it and it's like, I've seen that before. It's kind of like, I'm not going to identify these movies coming out, but I've seen one that's coming out, might have already came out. Not trying to encourage anyone to go watch it. Don't even want to give my opinion on it. But I seen it when I was watching the news, and it's about a man who's an assassin. And I seen it, and I thought, so this is the 4th time they're just going to show this man killing people and killing people and killing people. There has to come a time where people get tired of watching the same movie 4 different ways. But evidently, there's millions of people that want to pay to go see it again. And it's always mind-blowing. I remember when I was growing up, and I'll mention this movie's name just for the fact of what was in it. There was a movie called Braveheart. And the only thing I remember as a child, because I'd never seen the movie except for 5 minutes of it, the only thing I remember was the first time they showed to where in that movie where a guy put his hand, ran a man's head against a post where he was straight up against the post, and he took a knife and it looked like he slit his throat, and it looked very realistic. They had spent an enormous amount of time to make it look like he had slit that man's throat and killed him for theatrics. And when that first took place, that was mind-blowing. Now, you know, this movie that was coming out, just in the trailer they showed that was on the news, I've seen more horrific stuff in that than I've seen my whole life. And I'm thinking, this is what we want to be in society? This is the life that we're wanting to live? Well, people seek this stuff for entertainment, but once again, it desensitizes the mind. There's other things on the internet that desensitize the mind. Very perverted things that will destroy the mind. And there's a lot of proof out there. And I know when you're in a school setting, you can't get into a lot of things that evolve in teaching about the things that bring forth disease, you know, and I'll just call it sexual misconduct. But these are things that in other group settings, you can teach these things, and it's important that people know them. And I'm not saying teach what you feel is right. Teach what is proven to be true. That's what I'm saying. Well, this desensitization, notice it says it internalizes it to be normal and acceptable as unavoidable. So it just has to take place. You know, I just got to punch that guy. I just got to hit him. Just got to take a ball bat and swing it and hit him. You know, well, would you have done it before? No, but I've seen it on cartoons. Cartoons are one of the most violent things you can watch. You know, when I was growing up, I thought it was funny, but when you start really seeing, I would never let my children do it. When I was growing up, I thought it was funny. When I had children, and I thought, man, I can only imagine that boy taking a ball bat and hitting his sister with it like that after he watches it. You know, it changes your mindset. It's like, no, that's not something that should be done. When I was growing up, it was something that was considered unheard of, but in today's society, it's perfectly normal. You know, so these are things that, and I know William has talked a lot about these, the violence in cartoons and the things that come forth from them. We talked about them in the self-control unit. But they're very violent, just as violent as this movie that's out, coming out, going to be out, whatever it is. It's the same kind of violence where you're bringing harm and hurting. And when you desensitize people to where they're laughing about it, well, when they go to school and they pull a chair out from underneath somebody and somebody hits their head, it's all funny. And, well, now there's a serious problem with their head. Oh, no, it'll be okay. I've seen it on the cartoons before. It's all fine. Or I've played it on, you know, whatever these video games are. Yeah, I got bonus points for raping somebody and then shooting them. That's what we see in society. Well, continuing on here, it says these acts of disrespect are not normal. You know, and that's something that underline it. And you can write page 13 because we covered that on page 13, where disrespect is not normal. And we'll go back to that as we move through this chapter. It's not normal by any means and should not be accepted as just another sign of our changing times. You know, when times are changing and more people are getting hurt, more people are being disrespected, more people are suffering, the times might be changing, but it's going the wrong direction. You know, it's like one time I was traveling to come to a Peaceful Solution conference, and this was probably in 1995. And I was traveling with somebody who was very close to me, and they were, I'll drive. No, you're not driving. Absolutely not. You're not driving. And I was on I-20 going west. And we pull into a gas station, and we're with other people, and we're like, okay, you can drive. And as I'm laying down, I'm kind of laying back in the seat, and I open up my eye, and I see we're going east. I'm like, whoa, we're going the wrong direction. We just drove 700 miles this way. And we're already going the wrong. Well, they didn't really know that west was a better way to go if you wanted to get to Texas. You can't get to Texas driving east. And needless to say, I wasn't very excited to realize, because I didn't realize how far we'd been driving either. So, you know, if you want to help someone, try to keep the common goal in sight. If you're driving west, stay going west. That's probably a positive thing to do. And I know that person's probably watching right now. And I learn a lot about how to handle myself a little bit better when you're disappointed also. You find out that it's not worth getting upset about, and you can turn the vehicle around. It just takes a little bit longer to get to where you're going. Well, here it says in the previous chapter, students learned about the value of respecting themselves and others. In this chapter, they will learn about the respect is necessary on a societal level. They will also explore some of the adverse effects of disregarding the rules that govern respectful interaction. And other topics that will be covered in this lesson are violence and crime result from a lack of respect for others. Disrespect in the form of racism has robbed millions of people of their dignity and even their lives. The role of media in perpetuating disrespect, which will build on the self-control unit, and how people choose to show disrespect in society, how society benefits when all of its members consistently demonstrate respectful interactions. And then we have closing here. As parents and role models and educators, we can agree that any subject we want our children to learn must first be taught. In this regard, character education is no different. If we want future generations to be moral, respectful citizens, then we must teach and instill morality and respect into the minds of every child until the choice to interact respectfully with all people becomes a habit. And looking over to the next page, just to finish this up, it says, if we believe something is possible and can be achieved, we will work toward it. Let us show our children that it is possible for our world to exist without violence and hatred. Notice, by diligently teaching them how to respectfully interact, we will give them the skills to achieve moral character. So we're going to stop right there, and William's going to pick up with, of course, going through the introduction and getting into this chapter 4. Our next class, we are going to have our next class. It's going to be on 4-2. 4-2, we'll have that class at 5:30, but the class following that on 4-5 is going to be canceled because we have a huge event. This is for everybody to plan. So the next class will be on 4-2, and then we won't have class on 4-5, but then we'll have the following after that. So thank you for joining us once again, and we look forward to seeing you at that time.